Hello, beautiful people. Joanna here from Mindful Counseling, also known as JDS Counseling. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube, where my colleague and I have recorded some videos and educational resources on mental health. Now, I know my last episode was recorded at the end of May of this year, where I was focusing on acknowledging your tiredness. And I have to say that I acknowledge my tiredness, where I utilized June and July to really take care of myself as well as my family. And that is to say, trying to enjoy the summer vacation, and where I was last year. I think last year was more of a shutdown situation where we were either too afraid to do things or not a lot of places were necessarily as opened towards the public. So that was my last recorded episode at the end of May. And here we are in August. So today's episode really focuses on something a little bit different. And even though I have few thoughts in mind as to what I really wanted to talk about, I feel like this one is a fit title for today. And it has to do with compromise. Now, I may have talked about compromise a little bit in my previous episodes, but I think this is more to focus on a more detailed version of the compromise. And I'm sitting in a car today recording this because I just had a nice 2-mile walk, a very short, maybe for some could be long, but 2-mile walk that I just did around the park, and acknowledging of how good it felt. And I could have done something completely different, such as sit in a car while my daughter is at gymnastics and just relax. So I said to myself, why won't I just go for a walk? And I realized that I was compromising with my inner self. The part of me that may have not just wanted to do anything and just sit and, hey, maybe even fall asleep. Or the part of me that can utilize the 2 hours and take a walk. It's a beautiful day today. It's not hot. It has a breeze going on and it feels just right. So here I am as I was walking, I was talking to myself like we all do. We all have an internal dialogue and we have thoughts that cross, and some are good thoughts, some are bad thoughts, and they're all there. We're humans. So we do have this internal dialogue that goes on in our head on a daily basis where we try to figure things out. So I know when I was walking and I'm looking and observing and listening, here I was compromising with myself of whether or not I should go for that walk, and not to realize how I was actually enjoying the walk. So then I took the compromise a little bit further. So I went from an internal compromise where there's the child in me and the parent in me, and we have to do that internal dialogue to compromise with ourselves as to what we want to do and what we can allow ourselves to do, so that way there is not too much of one or the other. That's compromise. And then I could take it a little bit step farther, where we too have to not only compromise with ourselves, our internal dialogue, but we compromise with our children, our friends, our colleagues, our parents, and we compromise on that too, as to what one should do or not do, and how much do we give, how much do we take. And that goes with children and what they want to do and what we allow them to do and what they allow us to do with them, right? So that's another compromise. What we do with our kids, how we compromise with them, how we compromise with our colleagues and our friends on maybe what we should do, what vacations we should take, or how can we spend dinner time together, what day should be a good day to actually hang out. And the same thing with our parents, whether we live with them or not live with them, whether we lost them or not, that's another discussion. But also how we compromise with our parents and how they compromise with us, given the fact that they're older. So, and then again, taking that compromise even further. and to see how far we can take it so it works. Then I took as far as humans, population in general, and how do we compromise as a society. And that goes into things we like, or maybe things that we are for and what we agree on versus what we do not agree on. And then how do we compromise as a society? And now I'm thinking vaccines. I'm thinking COVID. I'm thinking what's healthy for us, what is not healthy for us in reference to food. So it could be just a lot of different topics that circulate around us as a population, as a society, as a nation again, and what feels right, what is right, and how do we compromise? How do we compromise as a society on what we think is right, maybe feel what is right, and which one do we follow, and where we don't necessarily allow our egos to take over. Because I think no matter what situation we're in, whether it is as a society, as a family member, or even as that inner self in a dialogue, our ego can take over so quickly as to what we want. And we fall into it, whether it is that inner dialogue, and I say to myself, I will eat a huge pint of ice cream, or the part of me that can say, have some, enjoy it, but you don't have to eat the whole thing. So how do we compromise as a society with things that we want to do, and things that maybe we should do, we feel should be right versus wrong? So I know I just said vaccines and I said food, but it's all of it. Whatever comes to your mind, it's what you want to focus on. And for me, as I was walking in a park, I could not help it but to think about just us as a population and how can we strengthen, regardless of our differences, how can we still compromise? How can we still compromise while acknowledging that some of us are so different, that we believe certain things versus what others believe? So how can we compromise? We may be so different in so many different ways, in unique ways, and have such difficulty in just compromising, where we give a little and yet again also take a little. And I mean that in a sincere way. When someone wants to educate us on something, to allow ourselves to listen. And the same thing on our end, to educate others on what we know, and hopefully allow them to listen to us. So this part of compromise, that we don't have to necessarily feel or think that we are always right? Whether as parents to our kids, or us as children to our parents, or our internal dialogue, whatever it is that we think is right or wrong. But to go further than that, to allow others to speak and to listen, and to hopefully allow ourselves to also have a dialogue and allow others to listen, to not fight this urge of wanting to do better or to think that we know better, but to compromise. And how do we compromise? How do I, as a human being, compromise with someone else that is so completely different, who may not necessarily always see my views, and who may completely think that I may be wrong in so many different ways, or right in so many different ways, which is great too, but I go back to this compromise. How do we? And how do we answer that question? Now, some of you might answer these questions in your heads or think about what I'm saying, and some of us might have absolutely no idea. I don't have idea. How do we compromise? I could only think of myself as, how do I compromise with others? Where do I give a little bit, but at the same time allow myself to take a little? In other words, allow someone else to speak, where I'm able to take it in and just understand it, to find compassion, to find empathy, and to just acknowledge others. We're all humans, and we all have different thoughts and ideas. And yes, of course, having the same thoughts and ideas might be great, because it unites us in so many different ways, but so do the differences. And I think we can grow from being different, from understanding others who are different, whether they're for or against certain things. And I think, and this is just my thoughts, is if we can understand and have just a little bit of compromise with other individuals, instead of just thinking of ourselves as a defense, as an ego, as someone that knows the most or thinks that we know the most, is to just find the ability to listen to others and listen, and to hear possibly where they're coming from, why they may have certain views, and how can we at least try to be open to those different views. Acknowledge yourself that even you may not always be right, that you too can be wrong. I know many times I am wrong. I always say to myself and others is, I'm not always right. And I hope not to always be right, because I think that's what makes it even more exciting, is to know that I can accept my flaws and where I can actually grow from the things that I do not know. So today's, once again, conversation, recording topic is on compromise. That the compromise goes so much further than that of the inner dialogue that you'll have with yourself. What you should do, what you should not do, and how do you compromise on what you should do or not do. And how do you take that compromise further, and how do you compromise with your children, with your parents, with your colleagues and friends. It has to exist in order to have relationships, in order to socialize, in order to have knowledge, and to grow and to educate yourself, and to take it even further, the compromise of us as humans, as human beings, to accept others for what they are and who they are, and to hopefully have others accept us for who we are, what we do, what we know or what we don't know. I think it's okay to acknowledge the challenges of the things that we do not know and grow from those things, to educate ourselves even further, so that way we can become better as a nation, better as humans, better as population, better as the world, so that way the world can become a better place. I think we have come a very far, long way from where we used to be, whatever that may be. And I think the curiosity of it too is, what do you envision yourself being in the remainder of whatever your life has to offer, for the remainder of your life? And how do you, as an individual, how are you willing to compromise with yourself and with others, as well as the world? So it's a very thought-provoking question in the sense of compromise, and how far can you take it after today's podcast. So I hope you found this quite curious and thoughtful, and hopefully inspiring in a sense of curiosity. And how are you willing to take the information that you are listening today and to listen to someone that is so completely different, a complete stranger, and how are you willing to compromise with them with what they know or they do not know, and how they're different they are and how different you are. So I hope all is well, and I hope you all find this podcast and all of the previous ones as fascinating as I found this one to be today. Until next time, be well, take care.